Hi, I'm Mercedes Pfab, here at the Captured on Canvas studio. Welcome to Picture This. For today's painting, I wanted to try something a little different, painting on something other than canvas. So for today's painting, picture this. We have a 36-inch tall by 8-inch wide board that we are going to make a porch sign. And on that sign, I'm going to be painting a tall, rustic snowman with a top hat, a long flowing scarf, and his cute little smile. Now to get started, we'll make sure that we have everything in front of us. Most importantly, on my easel, I have my tall board that I'm going to use as my sign today. We're going to use a handful of brushes. I'm going to have my largest square tip brush, which works really great for large areas. I'm going to have my middle-sized square tip or flat brush. I'm going to have my really tiny round tip for tiny, tiny detail. Last but not least, my bad hair day, just any hard bristled brush. I'm also going to be using a Q-tip, and I'll be showing some cool techniques with that. And on our paint palette today, we're going to be using a few colors. I'm going to make sure I have plenty of white, black, orange, a little bit of brown, and I'm going to make a teal scarf today. So I'm going to have a little bit of teal. And don't forget a cup of water as well as a sponge or a paper towel for keeping those brushes clean. To get started, I'm going to go ahead and start with what's most important, and that is going to be the head on my snowman. So I'm going to start with my large square tip brush. And I did forget to mention that this is a pre-stained board. So I just stained it with special walnut stain. You can choose any shade that you like. Just kind of treats that wood so that it's a little bit more ready for the paint. So I'm going to go ahead and use that large brush and some white. Now I want this to be a nice tall snowman. So I want my head to be about a third the way down from the top of my board. If I visualize about a third the way down, that's about where I want the head to be, or at least the center of it. So I'm going to find the center of my board and start with one dot. Now painting circles are much easier with paint than to draw them out, I always think, because we can just start from that dot and spiral out, continuing that circular shape, making it nice and easy while we're coloring it in at the same time. So I'm going to continue that out until I'm about maybe a finger's width from each side of my board. Making sure it's a nice even coat. I don't want to glob it on. And then it's nice easy to do a second coat on there as well. I'm just kind of going through refining those edges. And then I'm going to go back over it to smooth it out. So to check, it's almost the size of my hand. So I wanted to make sure it's plenty big because the whole bottom of the board is going to be the rest of the snowman. We want to make sure he's got an appropriate size head, make sure it's not too small for him. So I'm going to continue with that white and I'm going to make the sides of the snowman. And this is going to come kind of right underneath his head here to make his neck. I might just start with a couple dots, maybe about 4 fingers apart, keeping it centered underneath his head. And then I'm going to give him kind of a little bit of a curved figure. So from here, I'm going to make a rounded shoulder, and then I'm going to go straight down until I'm about halfway from the bottom of the board and the head. And I'm going to do a gradual curve out and off that lower side of the board. I'm going to mirror that on the right side here. So from here, going to angle it out, go straight down, being careful not to make it too curvy, and then off that right side of the board, wherever it kind of lands. For this, I'm going to go ahead and color it in with long brush strokes from the top, flicking down. I don't want it to all be solid. I kind of like fading it into the wood, gives it more of that rustic look. So I'm going to start from here again and just keep flicking down. And honestly, with the board, you can choose to paint around the sides or not. I usually don't, but I see where some people do, and it looks nice too, gives a nice finished look. But for me, I sometimes like to paint on the back side of it, so I wouldn't want the side of this one to be showing if I'm looking at the other side. So now that my head is dries pretty quick on wood, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a second coat here. Now that I have the white of my snowman, I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush by gently stirring that in the bottom of my cup. And keep repeating that until you get all that color worked out. Wipe it on the sides. And while this paint is wet, I want to go ahead and do a little bit of making it more rustic. So I'm going to use my Bad Hair Day brush, and I'm going to mix kind of a light to medium tan, just to kind of dirty them up maybe around the edges. So I'm going to take a little bit of white, about the size of a quarter, place that on my palette, and then take a little bit of that chocolate brown color and mix that in. Kind of going for a medium to light tan. Trying to keep it in a nice little pile too so it doesn't dry out quickly on us. So something just like that. And with this brush, I'm just going to be doing a little bit of dabbling. So I just like to relax my wrist and let the brush bounce. So maybe around this left and right side of the head, kind of helps create more of a shadow too, making it look a little bit more three-dimensional. So I'm going to start with going around that edge, and then without dipping any more paint, I'm going to bring that in a little bit so that it gradually fades away into the white rest of the face. So I'm going to do that maybe on the right side here as well. Dabble on the right side, and without adding any more paints, I'm just going to bring that in a little bit so that it gradually disappears into the middle of the face. And because I know I'm going to have a hat on him, I'm also going to maybe add a little bit across the top, coming down, kind of visualizing where I want my hat to be. I'd say it overlaps probably about an inch, so I want to come down quite a bit there. Just fill in the top, and once again, dabble it so that it disappears into the rest of the face. And I'm also going to continue that on the left and right side of his body. So a little bit of this, again, just starting at his little shoulder there, and a dabble, and once again, carrying that in a little bit so that it fades away into the white. Now, if you ever add too much of this color, it can happen. You can always go back with white and kind of touch that up and brighten it up again too. I'm going to do the same thing on the right side. So it is kind of important not to have too much of this paint on your brush. Kind of dabbling away. And because I know there'll be a scarf, I may as well just kind of add a little bit of a shadow underneath kind of where that band around the neck will go. Just a dabble. And I might just carry in a little bit at the bottom. All right. I always like to take a step back and look at it, make sure it's well balanced, but we are going to go ahead and let that dry before we start our next step, so make sure you wash your brush and we'll take a little break. Welcome back to Picture This. We have just finished painting in the white of our snowman, so now we're going to start with its detail. I'm going to go ahead and start with that top hat next. So I'm going to be using my largest square tip brush, and I'm going to be using some black just to draw that hat. With the black and this brush, I'm going to start with the brim of the hat, making a nice thin line going across my board using the thin side of my brush. So it's important that I'm holding it laying down horizontally, so when I go left and right, it makes a nice thin line. Now with the hat too, we want to make sure that it overlaps the head, because otherwise if it doesn't, it looks like it would tip right off. So I'm going to start with one dot in the middle of the forehead, about an inch down, right where I want that brim of the hat to overlap. So I'd say somewhere in there, about 2 fingers, give or take. And then I'm going to make the brim maybe with a slight angle, going across from the left to the right. Nice light pressure to start. And now I'm going to go ahead and thicken it up a little bit. Maybe adding a little flare to the left and to the right. And there we are. Now I'm going to go ahead and make the rest of the hat. Now with this can be the most tricky, but I will say this, with painting on wood, there is some advantages versus canvas. There is such thing as an eraser. It's called sandpaper. So if you do make a mistake at any time, know that just let it dry and you can sand it off later. Or if you really don't like it, take a belt sander to it later. But I'm going to go ahead and start with a dot right in the middle of my hat. And I'm just going to decide how tall my hat is going to be. So from here, I'm just going to draw a straight line up. I want it to be nice and tall. So maybe about a hand's width down from the top, give or take. And then I'm going to just basically make this sideways H. So I'm going to decide now how wide the top of the hat is going to be. So from here, I like to add a little bit of a wave to it. This side probably is going to go off the left side of my board. And on the right, I'm going to maybe have it angle up, maybe about 4 fingers wide, give or take. We can always widen it later if you're unsure. But from this corner, I'm going to connect it down to right where that head meets the top of the brim of the hat there. So nice light pressure. Might add a little bit of a curve to it, nothing too crazy. And now I have the right side of my hat. Because this left point is off the side, it might be better to start at the bottom. So trying to keep this symmetrical, starting right where that head met the top of the brim, and that wavy line, and going off that left side of my board. Now I'm going to go ahead and color it in. Nice long brush strokes. All right. Now I'm going to add a little bit of texture to my hat, and I'm going to be using that same brush, kind of mixing kind of a medium to dark gray. So I'm going to take a little bit of black to the side, not very much, maybe the size of a dime, and we're going to add some white to that to brighten it up a little bit. I don't want too much contrast, so I definitely like it more on the dark side. And then I'm going to wipe off my brush, closing it up, making sure I don't have too much paint on my brush again. And then I'm going to make kind of either hashtags or tic-tac-toes throughout the hat to add some texture. So coming down at an angle from that upper corner and kind of flicking away. I'm not going to have it throughout the whole hat, very heavy, just kind of fading away to the left and continuing down, filling at the top. And then I'm going to go across the other way. So you can start from the left or right, whatever works best for you. Once again, flicking away. Just to add a little bit of texture. Then we're going to go ahead and clean off our brush. For our next step, we are going to jump in probably the most scariest part of the snowman, and it is going to be that carrot nose, because it's his face and he's always going to look like this. So with that middle-sized brush, we're going to do this really step by step. So with a little bit of that orange, I'm going to take that to the side. I kind of like making more of a burnt orange color, so it's not so bright, especially if he's more on the rustic look. I'm going to take a little bit of this brown and mix that in. It's just going to give it more of a burnt orange shade. Okay, now with this, I want nice light pressure, and I'm going to start with a dot right where the base of the carrot's going to be on the face. It is centered in that circle head. So right in the middle of the face, I'm going to start with one dot right in the middle. And from that dot, I'm going to decide how thick I want the carrot to be. And it is going to have a little bit of a curve to it. So it's kind of like the left parenthesis here. Using the thin side of the brush, I'm just going to add that little curve to it for the base of the carrot. And now the scary part. I'm gonna start with the top of the carrot, and I always like it to go out a little longer than the side of the face. So I'm gonna start with really light pressure and maybe a slight wave to the brush. Not too much, because otherwise he'll look like he has a wart. So we'll just draw that wavy line all the way to the end. And then I'm going to start from the tip to make sure I don't lose that little point, coming down, getting a little bit wider into the base of the carrot again. And that's the hardest part. So now with coloring it in, we just use the wide side of our brush, and I follow that same curve as the base of my carrot because this color is a little see-through. We're going to use that to our advantage here to look like the texture of the carrot. So just continue that same curve, coloring it in, one brush stroke at a time until you get to the end. And then I'm going to do one more thing while that paint is wet. I'm going to create a shadow on the bottom of the carrot. So I'm just going to wipe off my brush. No need to clean it. I'm going to take a little bit of that brown. And I'm going to do little flicks up from the bottom. So still holding it horizontally, starting from the bottom and doing short little flicks up. So I'm not covering the entire carrot, just a little bit at the bottom to create a shadow. And there is the carrot nose. So we're going to go ahead and clean off our brush. Before we brave our next step, we'll take a little break. Welcome back to Picture This. We are now ready to finish the detail on our snowman with the scarves, even the face, all the fun stuff. So we're going to be using our large square tip brush, and I'm going to start that scarf next. And I chose to do a nice light teal. With that, I'm going to start with a big scoop of white because I want it to be a nice light shade. So I want at least the size of a quarter, separating that on my palette. Then I'm going to take a little bit of teal on the corner of my brush and mix that in. Once again, keeping it in a nice little pile. And then I'm just gonna wipe off some of that extra paint. Sometimes it likes to stick to our brush. All right, kind of a minty teal here. So with this, I'm gonna go ahead and use the wide side of my brush, and probably twice will be about the width of that I want for my band around the neck for the scarf. So I'm gonna start just beyond this left corner here at the neck, because I don't want that little point to show, and I want to make sure he doesn't look strangled either. So I'm going to start way over on this left side and having a slight smile down going over to the right side. And it's a little thin yet, so like I said, 2 brush strokes. I'm going to go right underneath and continue another wide stripe of that color, making sure that it goes out just a little bit from his shoulder and even a little bit in the lower part of the face. This is just going to help him look really relaxed and bundled up. Nice long brush strokes going all the way across. And now I have the knot. You can choose what side you'd like it on. I'm going to do it on the left side. And it's just going to be a circle that stands a little bit above and below the band of the scarf. So from here, I'm just going to arch up. Just continue right in front all the way around, so that it stands a little bit taller. When we outline it later, you'll see it a little better. And then I'm going to use the wide side of the brush coming down for the ends of the scarf. And I want them to come down nice and long because we have plenty of board here. So for my left side, I'm going to use that wide side coming down and maybe kind of curving off to the left side here. And at the bottom, I might just add a little bit more width to it. So just kind of bringing it over about 2 brush strokes wide and bringing it up back into that original brush stroke so that it's not any wider up at the top. Just adding the width at the base or the end of that scarf. And I'm going to do that same thing for the other end. And I like to add some variation. So maybe this one would be a little bit longer from up here, kind of separating. Going through the middle, add a little bit of width to it, and then back up, getting nice and narrow again. You're at the top of that end of the scarf, making sure that's all nice and colored in. And one more thing I want to do with this color is add a little ribbon around his hat. So right above the brim of the hat, I'm going to use this brush standing up and just do one swipe from one side to the other. I'm going to start just on the outside of the hat and go from one side to the other. Nice long brush stroke here. Going all the way across is going to help give it a nice even coverage. Then I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush. Now while that dries, we may as well brave the part that people usually anticipate, and it's going to be creating that cute little snowman face. Because like I said, he does look like this forever. So with that Q-tip, take a deep breath. We're going to use that black. And with this Q-tip, it's nice because you have a little more control. You're not fighting all those hairs of your brush, and you can hold it a little bit closer. It's a little bit more familiar to like a marker or something. So with the black, I'm going to start with one dot where I want each of those eyes. The one is just going to be to the upper left of the nose, and the other one's going to be to the upper right. Now honestly, you can leave it just like that, but from here, I want to spiral out to create a little bigger eyes. And I try to keep it a little bit more of an oval shape. You can make them circle though, either way works. And try your best to make them the same size. I know sometimes when you're going back and forth, making them bigger one little movement at a time, then you end up having goggles. So be careful. There's such thing as too much play. But then we're going to continue with that black, and now we're just going to make those dots for that smile from one side to the other. And that smile, I like it nice and big. So it's going to be way up on this left side, centered from the left of the head to the nose. And I'm going to start with one dot right there. Now with each dot, take your time, make sure you're headed in the direction of a big, nice smile up into the other side. I probably space them out, maybe 1 to 2 fingers apart. Take a step back and look at it if you need. And one more over there on the right side. All right, and now an easy step. We're going to continue that same thing for a row of buttons all the way down the front of our snowman. And with these, I think it's kind of fun to make the buttons a little bit bigger as they come down. Just kind of gives it a little fun style. So I'm going to start right up at the top, making my top button. And as I come down, maybe 2 to 3 inches apart, making them just a little bit bigger. And once again, I kind of like mine more tall oval shape. But you can always change it up if you want. And if your scarf goes in front of where you want your row of buttons, you can choose to stop there or just go right alongside of it. That'll work too. And I might just fit one more, maybe underneath. So you can see, I'll just see the bottom of the button. And now we're done with our Q-tips. So we're going to go ahead and put that away. And we are going to start the outlining. So with the outlining, we want to make sure we're always using light pressure. Me personally, I like using my middle-sized flat tip brush. It holds a little bit more paint than using that tiny brush, but the tiny brush works best for you. Go ahead and work with that. With the black, I'm just going to outline around my scarf with really light pressure. And that is going to be to start with around the knot. I like to outline that first because everything meets at that knot. And we'll also add some fringes. I always like the little frillies at the end. So just quick little pressure with the brush. You can add that across the end. And this is always fun. You can always design up your scarf however you'd like. You know, if you want a different design on it or a style, you can put little stitches on it. Just have fun with it. There's no right and wrong here. And I'll continue with outlining the carrot. Light pressure. I'm going to start at the base of my carrot and then just outline the rest of it. Once again, being careful not to lose that little tip of the carrot. Sometimes it can look rounded. So try to keep it that little point there. And then for fun, just highlight some of those creases in the carrot. So just nice light curls there. with the brush. And then we can clean our brush. Now we're gonna frost them up a little bit. So with that middle-sized brush, I'm gonna use some white and add a little bit of style to that band around the hat and even the scarf. So the band, I just like to add one little highlight going across the top and even the right side. And even just adding a little snowflake or something's always fun. So you can just start with a nice big X. And one more line going in between each way. And the part that's easy to get lost in is those little lines on the snowflake near the end. I always just make a little V, so one touch with my brush. And once again, if you like the small brush, usually that works better for this step. Unless you have a nice fresh brush too, it makes it easy just to do one touch. So either way works. Just at the end, just adding that little V to add to your snowflake. Nice light pressure. And we can always add a little bit of highlight to the top of the hat, the right side here. And we can add a little bit more of those hashtags or tic-tac-toes throughout our scarf to add some style to it. So just kind of throughout the band, light pressure, couple angle lines going this way and some going across. We can even add a little bit to our carrot. So just light pressure, little white lines at the top of the carrot nose. So many little areas you can add a little glare to. Now the eyes. I have a little trick with that, and it is just a little dot in the upper right corner that I like to do to bring them to life. So I like to turn my brush around and actually use the back side, dipping it in the white, and it'll give you that perfect dot every single time. So in the upper right corner, I'm just gonna do one dot of each eye. And then I'll make sure to wipe off that end of the brush before I forget and bump myself with it. And then we'll clean off our brush as well after outlining or detailing. Now the final step will be just to add a little bit of snow, which I always think makes it so much more fun. So we're gonna go back to our Bad Hair Day brush here, and we're gonna use a little bit of white, dabbling it just to make sure I don't have too much paint to start. And I always like to think of it as little clouds above or wherever gravity would pull that snow down. And that's going to be across maybe the top of the hat, a little bit at the top of the scarf. But I'm going to start right up at the top, a nice heavy pile to the right. So I'm just going to dabble, kind of creating like a clumpy, choppy hill here. Just once again, bouncing my brush back off of the board, letting the brush do the work for me. And just adding wherever. I might add some around the band of the hat here. Up in this corner, kind of brings it out a little bit too, especially if you have a darker stained board. And even a little bit above the band around the neck, that scarf. And across the top of the neck. And there we are. Feeling pretty good about it. So when an artist is done, they always sign their masterpiece. So I like to use that tiny brush and light pressure. And I like to sign it down in the lower corner. And this is where sometimes you wish you don't have such a long name. And there is our snowman porch sign. Thank you for following along with me, Mercedes Pfab, at the Captured on Canvas studio. We'll see you next time on Picture This.